So I just wanted to start this by actually asking you a question. There will be two of them actually. And what you can do, you can just jot it down on a piece of paper, or you can share via chat. And the question is, would you like to live a healthier lifestyle? And by that, I mean, is there anything in your life right now that you feel like you need to change or upgrade in order to really maximize your life and to really feel like you are at your best health? So feel free to share in the chat if you would like. For some of us, I know for me, sometimes I look at all the plastic that I still consume, even though my food containers are all glass, water bottles are, stainless steel or glass. And yet I still buy berries, right? And they come in those little plastic containers, and there's plastic in the sushi package, which I every once in a while get. And so I'm still figuring out ways to really step away from plastic in a bigger way. Also improving maybe certain things that I eat, or leaving behind certain things that I know aren't ideal for my body. It could be about moving your body more, maybe walking more, or being outside more. So anything that you think, just based on your own experience and your knowledge, that is something you would like to change or upgrade. Everybody has one? So now, what is the biggest obstacle that is in the way of making this change for you? And I'm actually looking at planting berry bushes in my house, which I'm very excited about, so that I don't have to deal with berry plastic containers anymore. I know that's not always available to all, but that's one starting place for me. So again, you can let me know in the chat, or let me know, or write it down on a piece of paper. And at the end, when we all get unmuted, we'll talk a little bit about it again. So I am Thais Harris. I am board certified in holistic nutrition, and I'm the founder of Nourish Together. I have in the chat a link to my website, and also a link to something I'm offering to you, which is a meal prep guide. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. I lead group detoxes. I have a lot of programs for families. I'm also known as the mom nutritionist, because I work with moms and families to really improve the health of the whole family, and especially to start young with kids so that we can prevent a lot of the chronic illnesses that are unfortunately rising in our country and in the world. I have presented at a number of conferences, both in the US and in Europe, and I have served in the faculty of Bowman College, which is a school of nutrition. And I was also the nutrition education manager for a wonderful nonprofit called Serious Community Project. They're mostly located in California, but also have 11 affiliates throughout the country. So my objective to share with you today is to really assist you in making some healthier choices. And I think in this world of sort of nutrition information that can be so confusing and so controversial, I really want to make this very simple. And we'll talk a little bit about organics and clear the air about that. Is it really elitist? Is it really a marketing gimmick? I don't think so. And so we'll unpack that a little bit. We'll identify some of the reasons why commercial agriculture and factory farms are not sustainable for our health or for the planet, and then talk about what the options to those are. And those are the resources that I'll share with you for sustainable foods, and then how to make that doable in your budget so that we don't break the bank. How does that sound? Let me know in the chat. Let's see. I'm going to check the chat really quick. Great. Okay. I'm going to put the chat in the corner here. Lovely. So I just want to talk why sustainable nutrition, right? The sustainability really is defined as our capacity to endure. And so when we look at nutrition, both for our own health, the health of our body, of our family, what we can afford, we also need to think about nutrition in a larger sense, about how are we using those resources in a way that the earth can endure, right? So our impact of the food choices that we make in our lifestyle will impact economy, ecology, and the healthcare without harm. They actually coined the term environmental nutrition, which is looking at the fact that healthy food cannot be defined by nutritional quality alone. It is the end result of a food system that conserves and renews natural resources, advances social justice and animal welfare, builds community wealth, and fulfills the food and nutrition needs of all eaters now and into the future. And so a lot of what we'll talk about today is based on these principles. How do we make healthier choices for ourselves then? Well, one of the ways we can do that is really focusing on soul foods. Would anybody like to take a crack at typing in the chat what you think SOUL stand for? I'm going to give you a little time. I'll start talking about vegetables, and let's see if you can figure out what would that acronym soul foods stand for. Maybe I'll give you the first one. S is for seasonal. Sustainable is great too. And then OUL, just, send me some ideas. And the thing here is that when we are guided by this principle, it becomes simpler to shop. And also it's really great to do meal planning based on the seasons. So the thing about seasonality, and L is for local, is that you really start being a little bit more in tune with what's available where I live at these different times of the year. And turns out that those foods are actually better for our bodies at those times of year. When we're eating a lot of cucumbers and watermelons in the winter, that's not ideal. Those are very, very cooling foods. And they tend to be more readily available when? In the summer, right? That's when we actually need the cooling foods. And then in the winter, we have the heavier foods that are helping us stay warm through the winter. Excuse me from that. And those are the butternut squashes and the heavier squashes and potatoes and things like that. So really understanding that seasonality also helps our body better adapt to what's available at different times of year. There we go. Seasonal, organic, unprocessed, and local. Thank you, Gail. Yes, unprocessed, unrefined. Beautiful. So soul foods. Eating more vegetables. Chris Carr, who is somebody who has healed herself from cancer, or at least has very well extended her life based on what doctors told her. And she did that by really changing diet and lifestyle. And now she has written many books and has a big following. And I love this term. She talks a lot about eating a plant-passionate diet, which does not necessarily exclude animal proteins, animal products, but it's just about adding more plants, and plants that are, very close to their original states. So not plants as in ground flowers, but plants in vegetables. So lots of greens and reds. The more colorful our diet can be, the better, because one of the things we need the most today is antioxidants, and those come in from those colorful fruits and veggies. Antioxidants are really the only compounds that can neutralize free radicals, which are these little pesky compounds that can attach to our cells and create havoc. And they can cause cells to mutate. When that happens down the road, we end up with things like cancer, or at the very minimum, just cause inflammation. And because we're exposed to a lot of those just from breathing and living, we need a lot of the one thing that can actually neutralize it and sort of escort it away from the body, which are these antioxidants. So lots of vegetables, both, especially if you're still, for example, if you like eating animal products, which is wonderful. I feel like there's definitely a place for them in the diet. But when we rely on those too heavily and we're not also at the same time eating lots of vegetables, we end up with an imbalance, right? So more plants, the new plate, we finally got off of the pyramid from the USDA, and now they're looking more into this food pattern, right, and the plate. And we'll see that 2/3 of the plate should be filled with vegetables. And then we have some room in there for, and part of those vegetables can be a little bit starchy, but the idea is to really colorful vegetables above ground that aren't super starchy is where it's at. Organic as often as possible. Now we'll explore organic in the next couple of slides. So I'm just going to jump ahead here. Healthy fats. Can you guys let me know what are some of the healthy fats that you love to eat? One good example here is avocados, right? They have a lot of really healthy fats. Yay, Alini, very well. Who else? Yes, peanuts, nuts in general, right? And especially nuts like walnuts and almonds, pistachios. Nuts have very healthy fats. They have a lot of fiber, and they also have a lot of minerals. So they can be really amazing for, packing in the nutrition, helping us feel full longer. And, some peanuts can be a little problematic for some people. And I'll say that, especially say if we're eating a lot of peanut butter that might be mixed with other oils and sugar, for example, that is something we definitely want to avoid. But if we're eating peanuts, especially Valencia peanuts that are grown more in desert-like conditions, so they're not as susceptible to mold like other peanuts are, then they can be very healthy. And of course, once in a while, making fresh peanut butter can be delicious. A lot of stores offer that option. And so they're not all bad, but it's important to know where your peanuts are coming from and whether, if you're eating peanut butter, if there's anything else in that peanut butter mixed in. Salmon, Karen, thank you. Salmon's one of the best fats we can eat because of the high content of omega-3 fatty acids, which are also very anti-inflammatory. So we talked about antioxidants, right, with those veggies. And salmon, go ahead.
So I'm home.
Oh, should I think we have somebody who is not muted. So let's see.
Wow.
There we go. Is that it? I think I got it. Super. So yeah, so salmon, olive oil. There was a wonderful study showing that, in the Mediterranean diet, for example, one of the top foods in that diet that makes it so healthy is olive oil, and that some of the people with the best health outcomes would consume up to 1 liter of olive oil a week. So it's a lot of olive oil, but it's amazing, and it can be great on your skin, as well as ingested. And so extra virgin olive oil, really great for that. So really focusing on those fats, because unfortunately our whole society kind of went on a fat-free craze, and that unfortunately did not make us healthier. It did the exact opposite. And so avoiding fats is not necessarily a healthy way to do it. Even butter. If anybody here is familiar with Dr. Mark Hyman, he has a book called Food, What the Heck Should I Eat? And it's a lovely book. And it's full of wonderful little quizzes and information. It's very interactive. And he points out to lots of studies showing that butter actually is not correlated with heart disease. So that's really important to know, right? Because for so long we were sort of afraid of it. Now, I wouldn't eat just any butter. It would have to be butter from, cows that are very healthy. So clean butter from pasture-raised cows is ideal. And of course, we won't eat a ton of it, but it definitely has a place in the diet. Or ghee, which is the clarified butter. It's the oil of the butter. And coconut oil as well, which even though it's rich in saturated fat, it's saturated fat our bodies know how to use, contrary to trans fats, which our bodies don't know how to use. So fat is really important for maintaining the health of our cells, especially the membrane of the cell, which acts as a brain because it chooses what it lets in and what it lets out. So ideally, a healthy membrane is letting in nutrients and letting out toxins, right? So focusing on those healthy fats, clean proteins, so animal products, especially as far as, chicken, turkey, beef, fish, as we mentioned, for those ideally are coming in from sources that you know and trust. So pasture raised and organic are ideal. And then, sustainable is really preferable if you can't get organic and pasture raised. Now, commercial farms, the CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, those are just very negative, both for the environment and for the cows, and therefore for us when we're eating that meat. There's a lot of toxins involved, a lot of medicines involved to keep the cows healthy when they're in such large concentration. And so if we don't sort of prioritize getting really good quality meat, which costs more, but then we can eat a little bit less of, and even getting different cuts of meat that we can make stews with, the things that aren't just like the top fillets. We can get a little bit more variety in our diet as far as the animal proteins, and then just a little bit smaller quantity when we're budgeting that out. And it makes a big difference, because eating more of meat that's cheaper is not necessarily going to support our health or the health of the planet. And then probiotics. Can you guys give me some examples of foods that contain probiotics that you already have in your diet? And probiotics really are the bacteria that supports our life. In our gut, we have trillions of these life forms in our whole bodies, actually. So our genitalia, our skin, our mouths, our eyes, everywhere in our bodies, we are covered with these microorganisms that outnumber us 10 to 1 as far as the number of cells. And I see here you guys added tempeh, yogurt, kefir, fermented veggies. Fantastic. That's it. Adding some of those every day will continue to support this life that's already in our bodies, and that has to always be kept in balance. And because of stress and being exposed to toxins just in our environment and our food, I have to say I eat a very organic diet. I would say that 90% of what I eat is organic. I have a garden. And when I tested myself, there was still glyphosate in my blood. And it's just amazing. I don't even know if, when I test some of my clients, the difference between going from a commercial, more conventional diet to an organic diet is huge. And it doesn't mean that we eliminate completely our exposure to toxins, right? Because unfortunately we don't. These things are so just everywhere in soil and air and water. But it's really important to keep making those choices, because when we are making choices for healthier food, we're also sort of voting, right, with our dollars. And we make sure that foods are grown a certain way more and more because there's more demand. So I mentioned glyphosate because glyphosate is the active ingredient in Roundup. And when it was first patented, it was patented as an antibacterial. And so what it does is it can mess up our internal microbiome. So we want to keep replenishing those probiotics. With fermented foods, it's great. And then if we can't, for some people that maybe have a histamine reaction to things like fermented veggies, then they can always get a probiotic supplement. And there's many today in the market that are really good. And then some health boosters. So these are things that will boost the nutritional quality of any meal. So those are spices, seaweed, and out of the spices, especially turmeric and cinnamon. These have huge properties, beneficial properties, anti-inflammatory properties. So whenever we can, having maybe a little seaweed mix. There are gomasio, and there's a couple of different spice mix that will include some seeds and some seaweed with some lovely sea salt, for example, and adding those to meals, especially for those of you that have children, having a little spice kit at the table can really help them get excited about eating vegetables, even things that they wouldn't normally eat. But we go, what could make this better? Oh, let's add a little bit of this paprika, or, and we add different things, and all of a sudden they're eating the whole bowl. So don't underestimate the power of those little health boosters, things like nutritional yeast also. And then chewing our food. Who here eats fast? Just say me, yes, something, type in. Maybe not every meal, but have you ever caught yourself maybe eating while distracted, whether with in a meeting or watching something or while working, and you look at your beautiful plate of food and then you look at it again and it's gone, and it's like, who ate my food? When we don't apply mindfulness to eating, it's like our brains don't even recognize that we just ate a meal, right? And digestion starts in the brain. So we send all these signals to our salivary glands to release saliva that has amylase, which is a wonderful enzyme that starts breaking down our food for us. Then we send signals to the pancreas to release other enzymes. And so there's so much that happens just from looking at our food, smelling our food, being aware that we're about to eat, maybe even saying, may this nourish me. Like, you really having your body as an ally, using the mind to help your body as your own ally so that you fully digest your food. And then on top of that, chewing slowly is one of the best ways we can reduce bloating, gas. A lot of these digestive discomforts go away, about 80% of them actually, when we start eating more mindfully and just chew our food more and don't give such a big job to our stomachs to have to break everything down. And then drinking clean water. So if you have a filter at home, that's amazing. I would definitely recommend filtered water versus plastic water bottles. We end up absorbing that plastic, which isn't ideal. Plus, there's the problem of the plastic itself in the environment. So drinking lots of water, that, 8 glasses a day is a good number. And ideally, if you want to know how much water for you, just divide your weight by half, and that's the number of ounces. So for somebody who's 130 pounds, they're going to need 75 ounces each day to stay properly hydrated. There are also hydrating drinks that we can have, coconut water being one of them, or just adding a little pinch of Celtic sea salt and a little squeeze of lemon to water. That is also very nourishing, and it's very hydrating. And then taking time to breathe, and certainly cooking at home as much as possible. We see these charts of, from the beginning of the century, when we used to eat out only at most 20% of the time, and the rest of the time we were cooking, right? And now that those lines have gone like this, where we are eating out 50% of the time and cooking 15% of the time. And that 50% of the time when we're cooking at home, sometimes it's just actually putting things together, right, from packages and cans. But when we're cooking from scratch at home, we support our health in a whole different way because we know exactly what's going into the food, right? When we're buying whole foods, we have less waste. And we'll talk a little bit about bulk shopping and how much that can really make a difference on what we're putting in the trash. So reducing our trash is huge when we are buying whole foods and making them from scratch. And Michael Pollan says something about this being the biggest act of love that we can do, which is to cook for ourselves, cook for those we love. So that's the total about those healthier choices. Now you can see a little repetition just on the vegetables with the fiber and the vitamins, and they're one ingredient, so you don't have to read labels, right? When you're buying vegetables, just make sure you find that a little organic label. But they definitely have a smaller footprint than processed foods. The biggest footprint are in processed foods. It's not even meat, especially if you can find meat locally. That's really okay. It's more about, certain, for example, frozen dinners. we used to do this exercise with the teens at Ceres Community Project where they calculated the miles that certain foods traveled. And so we would pick some frozen dinners and they would be amazed at how, the potatoes were grown in one place and then shipped to another place to then be processed. And then the corn came from somewhere else and the meat came from somewhere else, and how everything got processed and distributed. And it is mind-boggling. So we remove all that when we are eating less processed foods. Now, why does organic matter? Well, monoculture is actually creating really poor soil health. And there was an article at the Time magazine a few years back saying that in 60 years, we wouldn't have any healthy topsoil if we continue to do monoculture in the way that we're doing it now. So my hope is that there's enough of a movement now in this direction of more local and organic ways of growing food and more varied along with permaculture, so that we don't destroy our soil, because that would really impact the next generation's ability to feed themselves. The foods grown in a conventional way have less nutrients. There was a study out of Stanford that came out saying that organic and conventional were the same. That's actually not what the study said at all. That's how the media picked it up. The study was saying that, yes, the macronutrients are the same. So carbs, protein, fats are the same if you look at conventional or organic. But when you start looking into the micronutrients, like those antioxidants I was talking about, strawberries, for example, have double the amount of antioxidants when they're grown organically. So when they're not sprayed right from the outside in, when they don't have that protection from the outside in, and the strawberries actually have to create their own chemicals to protect themselves from pests and weather, they actually have more of those nutrients to give us those antioxidants. So yes, organic strawberries are more expensive, absolutely, but we're getting twice the antioxidants. So we're getting twice the nutrition we really want from them when we buy them organic. And there's a lot of reduction of varieties of fruits and vegetables when we are doing monoculture. So that's, why heirloom is so important, and kind of keeping of old seeds and eating this more local varied diet also becomes important for preserving varieties of fruits and vegetables. And then the worst part, as I mentioned to you guys, my levels of glyphosate, which is something that it is a chemical that interferes with our ability to make vitamin D. It's a chemical that interferes with our microbiome. It's a chemical that's now been classified as a carcinogen. In San Francisco, the first ever lawsuit was won for somebody who actually was exposed to glyphosate. So he used to apply Roundup in the school grounds, and he got cancer. And Monsanto was actually found guilty for knowing that glyphosate could cause cancer. And now there are thousands of other lawsuits in that regard. So it's definitely not something we want to be putting in our food. And all of this makes it very unsafe for farm workers and contaminates the soil and in water. On top of that, we add certain genetically modified foods, especially grains like wheat. They get sprayed with Roundup right before harvest, so they mature faster and dry faster. And then, as I was saying, genetically modified foods, things like BT corn, which is in our food production and a lot of processed foods, they are modified so that they can withstand larger and larger applications of these chemicals. So we really want to make sure that when we are choosing food, we are choosing foods that are grown, that are used, in crop rotation to not destroy the soil, that use manure, and compost, that have biological pest control in place. So things like permaculture, right, that have a lot of plant husbandry in place. And yes, organic growing still includes some pesticides, but they are organic based, so they're not synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. And they also exclude the genetically modified organisms. So organic does ensure better health for the farm workers, for the soil, for the water, for the air. It's not a gimmick. It's definitely not just a marketing thing. And when we go beyond the fruits and vegetables and look in some of that factory farming, which we just mentioned a little while ago, here you just have a little bit more details on that, where that those animals in factory farming are fed corn and soy. That's usually genetically modified, heavily sprayed. Some of these animals shouldn't even be eating soy, right? Like cows, they should be ruminating. They have such a beautiful and intricate digestive tract, and it's not really made for heavy amounts of corn and soy. So it's important to just think about all, the consequences of our choices all over the food chain. And they're also given hormones and some other antibiotics. And actually 70% of the antibiotics sold in the United States go into animals that are for food production. So that's a lot. We might be exposed to antibiotics and even not know about it. So pasture raised animals have higher nutritional value, especially anti-inflammatory nutrients like vitamin E and omega-3 fatty acids instead of the omega-6s that are more inflammatory. And they're eating their intended diet, so they don't have to be given so many medicines because their bodies actually work the way it was intended to work, right? And they have more room to roam. They're not given antibiotics. And they live in less concentration. And actually, a lot of farms will actually want animals. They actually want to have cows because it helps aerate the soil. And again, manure can be very healthy if it's not in large concentrations. So look for 100% grass-fed, pasture-raised, and/or organic. If it says all natural, that means nothing. There's no regulation for that. So how much does it cost now, right? Because once we think about making all these changes, or maybe just focusing on just starting with animal products first, for example, what does it really cost? Well, there's a saying that I love so much, says, pay the farmer, not the doctor. Now, nothing against the doctors, but really, if we make a little bit of a shift in the United States, we spend the least amount of money, so percentage of income in food, than most other countries. We're spending about 6% of our income in food and 10% of our income in healthcare or disease management, right? What if we could just switch that a little bit, spend a little bit more in food, so spend 10% of our income in food, and I'm willing to bet that we would reduce a little bit of our healthcare expense as well. Because when we start prioritizing food and health, and then moving our bodies, and, being outside, and a lot of other healthy lifestyle choices, we definitely have a direct effect in our health. And as a matter of fact, even cancer, a lot of the experts today say that up to 70% of all cancers could be avoided with diet and lifestyle. So that's not to make people feel bad, but it's more about the hopeful message that actually there's something we can do. It's not just something that happens to us, right? We can make better choices. And the less toxins we're putting in our bodies, and the more antioxidants, the more fiber, all the different things that will help us process our exposures, the better we'll be, and the more we'll be able to avoid things like chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease, and so on. One of the ways to budget that is to also look at the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So the list can be found at the EWG website. So I'm going to type that into everyone right now, ewg.org. You can download the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen are the top 12 foods that have the highest toxic residue. And those are foods you don't really want to get if if they're just conventional. So things like strawberries, better avoided if you can't get organic. As far as berries go, if one day you're at the store and you see that organic berries are on sale in the frozen section, buy a ton because they retain their nutritional value. So buying frozen is a really good way to actually, mitigate that budget issue. And then the clean 15 are actually the cleanest 15 conventional foods. So those are things that you can feel good about buying, even if they're not organic, so that then you can save your money for the organic things that are in the top 12 that are dirty. Does that make sense? So that's a great way to kind of balance those out. And then, like I said before, cooking at home, it's a huge way of saving money, because you can see here with this example, a packaged food. And if we look at eating out, or getting takeout, that's even more. And I imagine you probably all noticed that food cost went up, right? Especially this last year. And it was a cumulative effect from 2019 to 2020. Food had already gone up, and then 2020 to 2021 because of the pandemic, because of the storm in Texas. There was something like $600 million worth of food that got destroyed during that storm in Texas. So food cost has gone up, but the bigger cost is food out. So eating out went up 3%, and then buying food went up 2%. So when we look here, this is just a brief example of something that's processed, and that's supposed to be easy and convenient, right? But it has so many ingredients. And we look at the cost here per serving. When we're cooking at home, we can buy a little bit bigger quantity of foods. And in this case, this is making 4 servings. And when you divide it all, the cost per serving is actually even more doable in this organic meal over here. So it can be done. And there are a few other things we can do to help with the budget. Making a meal plan is super important. And so you can see at the top of the chat, and maybe I wonder if I need to copy, I'm going to copy and paste it again here. I am offering a meal prep for busy moms, but of course it can be for everyone. It can be for parents or non-parents. It's a very helpful guide for planning and preparing meals that will actually save time and money and stop waste. Because one of the things that's happening is up to 30% of all the food that we buy is going in the trash or the compost. But these numbers are actually based on, what goes in the trash. That's a huge waste. So imagine if that's 30% of your budget is going down the trash. How about making a meal plan, buying things that are fresh, maybe shopping a little bit more often so that things don't get pushed to the back of the fridge and go bad, right? And so that when we're making meals too, that we can make things that are really delicious and that we can make planned overs for the next day, so that right away we can use that portion of the dinner the next day for lunch to get it eaten. The problem is sometimes we'll make something and then we'll put it in the back of the fridge. And then of course, 3, 4, 5 days later, it's not going to be very appetizing. And ideally we are not eating things past 3 days anyway, because it starts growing bacteria and then there's some histamine problems. So the idea is to really kind of plan foods that we can have, for 2 meals. We have a dinner and a lunch the next day. We have our breakfasts kind of outlined, and we'll have a lot less waste. That would be great for the environment and great for your wallet. And when we go shopping, to have either go shopping after having a meal or a pretty heavy snack with some protein and fat, just so that we don't shop hungry. That's when we make the worst decisions and everything just looks so good, right? Especially like more processed foods that are so fast to get our hands on. And if you do look at coupons at the store, just make sure you're not using them for something that wasn't already in your plan. Because sometimes we think, oh, we're saving money, but it's for something we weren't really using anyway. So it's important to be aware of that. And then always looking at unit price, not package. Buying produce that's in season will always be cheaper, and it won't have traveled miles and miles and miles to get to us. Buying in bulk, if you can bring jars and have your jars weighed, then you can, eliminate a lot of plastic. And so you can have really fun containers. We have containers that we love. We also save a lot of our glass jars from when I buy sauerkraut and things like that, so that I can just then bring those jars, and once they're clean, I can bring them to the store to get my cashews or my chia seeds or anything like that. Having a little garden for herbs is amazing. And if you have room, a bigger garden for at least some lettuces and different things that will be in season, it's a great way to connect with where you are, the soil. There's all these microorganisms in the soil that are now, we can see the relationship with improved mood because of dealing with these microorganisms. So as much as you can do that and have a garden would be amazing. And, I have something here about going to the farmer's market near closing time. Now, please respect your farmer. This is in no way meant as disrespect, but when we are on a tight budget and we are at the farmer's market near closing time, sometimes, especially if you do build a relationship with your farmers and you know who they are and they know you, you could say, hey, if I take a bunch of this off your hands, right? If it's the end of the market, and Philippa can correct me if I'm wrong, but the farmers don't really want to pack all their food up again, right? So sometimes they feel motivated to just give a good deal for people that are coming in closer to the end that want to buy, a good, decent quantity of what the farmer's offering. So that's another way to do that. And then freeze, or for example, buying a lot of basil and then making pesto and having some pesto that you can freeze. So you could do a good deal, you buy a big quantity, you get it off their hands, and you can also have that amazing food to cook with and to make sauces and things like that. And like I said, buying frozen when on sale, and definitely combining vegetarian proteins at least one night a week. There was a big movement that started called Meatless Mondays. Has anybody here done a Meatless Monday? Or have a day of the week where they just eat vegetarian? That's a great way to also, improve that budget, maybe even do that two days a week. And it's really fun. Just make sure to, yes, great. Thank you, Philip. He just said, I do not do farmers markets, but sell through my CSA. I see frequent markets when I travel, and I'm amazed at how many items go back to the farm or directly to the community food bank. So yes. So that's really important. And then I have here combined vegetarian proteins, because when we are eating vegetarian, it's important to mix nuts and seeds and grains and legumes, just to make sure we are getting all of the 9 essential amino acids that tend to be present in meats, animal products, but that when we're eating vegetarian, we don't necessarily get unless we combine. So we can be very smart about this and really get all the nutrients we need in our diet. So we're almost at the end. I want to open for questions. I know I've been kind of running this, but I know it's a pretty packed presentation. And so here's some resources for you. Some of you might be aware of these. Philip, it'd be great to know what your CSA is if you want to type in the chat as well. But Butcher Box is a place where you can get grass-fed meats. So they ship it to you. Environmental Working Group, the WG, there's a lot of not only food information there, but they also have an app called Skin Deep, where you can look at different cosmetics and just see how they're rated in terms of whether they're safe to use or not. There was a study in England showing that most women had 500 chemicals on their body by the time they left the house in the morning, between all the different shampoos and makeup and lotions and nail polish, etc. So we tend to put a lot of stuff on our bodies, right? And so knowing which ones are the best is really important. The WG offers that as well. Then you have farmmatch.com. So you can just put in your zip code and it will show you some of the local farms that you can work with, what they are: Local Harvest, Thrive Market, Imperfect Foods, and then US Wellness Meats, which they're at grasslandbeef.com. So please, you can take a little picture of the screen if you'd like, and keep it for your reference and check them out. It's a great way to get your meals. Thrive Market, you can find a lot of organic products. They're more for your cupboard, though I think they now actually have even a meat service and a fresh produce. I'm not entirely sure, but the everything for my cupboard, I tend to order once a month from Thrive. And yeah, so I want to open back up so you can unmute and come back to the video so we can interact a little more. And I would love to know, like, what is one thing that you can do? Is there anything that this very brief talk inspired you to do to ensure your own and the planet's ability to endure? So that sustainability. For some of you, it might be to just say, you know what, I'm going to just reject one chemical. Maybe that's aspartame or yellow number 5. And that means that every time you go to the store, if you pick something that's processed, you're going to read that label and just make sure. So if you're saying, I'm not going to buy anything that has yellow number 5, which is actually really tough for kids, then make sure to read those labels, right? Or maybe you'll just eliminate GMOs from your diet. Maybe you just choose, you know what, I'm going to reduce how many processed foods I buy. Or as you can see here, for example, that's just a picture of different foods that contain aspartame that we might not even know about. And that's why I mentioned reading labels, because things like chewing gum, flavored waters, sugar-free products, even things like cooking sauces and children's medicines, yogurts, cereals, all of those can actually contain aspartame. So reading labels becomes really important here. Oh, great. So I see here, there'll be more resources and healthy spices and seasonings. Great. Do I have suggestions for brands or sources? I do. And there's one brand that is I think it's just called Co-op. And I'll send that out. And since Liz is going to send an email with these references, I'll add some spice blends in there as well. Spice blends and references. And I actually have a handout that is a kid-friendly spice kit. And that also has brands in there too. So I'll make sure to include a link to my handout for you guys with that. Great, buy more organic foods, beautiful. Yeah, so just to review, we talked a little bit about why eating diverse, fresh, seasonal, local, organic fruits and vegetables, pastured animal products. We want to focus on those organic whole grains. So oats tend to soak up that glyphosate. So oats are an important grain to get organic. And then wheat, anything with wheat products also. And then those nutrient booster foods are in here, flax seeds being one of them that I hadn't talked about before. Flax seeds are amazing. And then clean water, juice, broth, to breathe and connect to our bodies. I love this quote so much, and it's perfect that we're here at Chicory Wealth and really thinking about how our first wealth is our health. When we have our health, we have a million dreams, right? We want to do so many things. But when we are sick, we only have one dream, and that is to have our health. So remembering that really, to me, is what really solidifies this notion that our first wealth is health. And so I thank you so much for your participation tonight, for your interest in making better choices, not just for yourself, but for your family and the planet as well. And I shared those links with you. I hope that you will download the meal plan handout. I have a course coming up that is called Feeding Your Kids for Success. And it's a course. We have 4 live calls People have access to the course for a whole year. It's really exciting. So download those handouts and sign up for my newsletter, and we can be in touch about other offerings as well.